think technology plays an important role in costuming anyway, because as technology develops, there's more that you can do with it. I love working from the very beginning and seeing it at the end. And the feeling of fulfillment it gives you is like so great. And I think if you learn somebody's name and you use it, it's like the most important word to a person when you hear your name being said. Yeah, it's like put some beads on a string, done, you know.
Welcome to the TheatreArtLife podcast, and hello. We're putting the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the globe, the culture creators and the backstage masters. My name is Anna Robb.
My name is Anna Aguilera, and on this episode we will be talking to Jozef Koda about designing and fabricating costumes and props.
Australian-born Jozef is a designer of props, costumes, accessories and puppets. After touring with Phantom of the Opera and Wicked around Australia, New Zealand and Asia, he spent years as a manager of the creative costuming department at Universal Studios Singapore. In 2013, Jozef began working for Franco Dragone at several of his productions across Europe and Asia. He has recently relocated to Hong Kong to launch his own innovative workshop studio, J1K Costume Technology and Innovation, and he's currently working on several large projects in China. Jozef, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Good to see you and good to talk to you. We want to start today with talking about the very basics of what you do and defining costume props, accessories and puppets. So tell us a little bit about those elements and what you do in your workplace.
Okay, so I think my thoughts about costumes has evolved over the years. So when I was younger, I would think of them as anything worn on the body for like a movie or play, theatre, anything like that. But now I realize there's a lot more to it than just that. So costumes now, I think of it more as any kind of soft garment worn on the body, you know, for any kind of theatre performance. And you kind of also have costume props, which is kind of anything worn on the body, but a bit more structural, maybe something solid, something a bit unusual, which is a lot more difficult than just putting some soft fabrics together. And accessories is really anything worn on the body that's not a part of the clothing, like a headpiece, a mask, maybe something on the arms, like gauntlets, like things that you could imagine at home, like jewelry that you would wear, like to adorn the body. And puppets are, of course, kind of extensions of the human body and human performance. So we're manipulating them to create a character, whatever this puppet might be. You're using your body and your focus to kind of animate this static being and giving it character. And they can be anything really. They can be huge, they can be tiny, tiny little things. So it's really something that's an extension of you outside of your body, I would say.
And how did you get into this career? Like what drove you to be working with costumes and props and all of these things when you were younger?
Well, I think when I was younger, I was really a creative child and I loved to make things. And I used to get like palm leaves from the garden and weave something, and I just like making things. And then as I got older and I was in high school, in my teenage years, I started earning some money and I really enjoyed buying new clothes, and I found them very interesting and kind of was drawn towards fashion. And originally I was on a path to study architecture at university, and then quickly realized it wasn't really for me. And I thought about what I wanted to do and realized I wanted to do something creative. And I thought, okay, well, maybe fashion. So in the town I lived in, there was only fashion courses available at college. So I enrolled. But in my years there, I kind of felt like fashion could be a little bit restrictive for me. And it was about creating something that was trendy, that everybody liked at the time. And costumes I could see as something much more than that. It was like your imagination was the limit, and you could really create a character and a story. And at the time, I think Cirque du Soleil was becoming a big deal, and I was just amazed at what they were doing. And I loved the colors and just shapes and everything. And I think also because a lot of their costumes were structured, you know, they had some kind of 3D element to them, like whether it was like a half musical instrument, half human being. And I just found that really interesting. And because I like making things, not just making clothes, it was kind of a cross between being able to build something, fabricate something in 3D, but also have something that you can wear on your body and it's like becomes a part of you. And I'm very interested in working with the human body. And so, yeah, I just started in TAFE and I did a TAFE diploma, which is very hands-on, which was perfect for me because I just started immediately the first day on an industrial machine. And you just taught everything you need to know when you get out there in the industry and how to do it. Whereas university can be a lot about like the theory behind everything. And then you get thrown out into the industry and you actually have no practical skills.
How would you explain TAFE to the international community in terms of its education? And it's more of a, I don't know if there's an equivalent in other parts of the world. So just to sort of in simple terms.
Mm-hmm. I think from my knowledge, it's kind of an equivalent to college in the States. It's like a
trade as such, maybe?
Yeah, like a trade. So in the TAFE campus that I studied at, it was like people studying to be chefs, or it was carpenters and fashion and some IT kind of people. So you would often arrive on campus in the morning and you'd see the carpentry students in like a big kind of football field and they were constructing a wooden deck, and it was like their practical skills being tested and they had to build a deck, So it was this kind of place. It's kind of quite unique. And a lot of the teachers had spent many years in the industry. So when you learn from them, they're really teaching you everything that they know. And they teach you the way that they need to teach you. And then they teach you the way that they developed themselves when they were out there in the industry that could be a shortcut, So they'd say, this is the proper way. But then there's this way that we did, and it's much faster and you get the same result. So it was kind of a cool kind of in-between education experience.
That sounds like me going to Jozef. How do I solve this problem?
Yeah.
So how do you go from there to do Broadway tours and then branch out to circus and then having your own shop?
Well, I think a lot of it's to do with my personality. And I always like to be improving myself and wanting to explore more and take new opportunities. So I think sometimes having that attitude always out there kind of attracts opportunities for you. And every job that I did, I tried my hardest and I worked long hours and I'd show up early. When I first started working in theatre, it was when I was studying at TAFE. And my partner was doing a tour with his performing arts school in the Brisbane QPAC, Queensland Performing Arts Centre. And so he's one of those people that he's very charismatic and takes opportunities. So he was walking past the wardrobe and he was like, oh, I just need to duck in here quickly. And he ducked in there and saw this lady and she ended up being the head of the wardrobe department. And he was like, oh, my partner really loves costume. Like, do you have any jobs? And they're like, yeah, we're always looking for male dresses for the shows that are coming to Brisbane. There's not many. So that was kind of my first job. So I started working at the theatre and I think I just showed a lot of enthusiasm. Like I would arrive 4 hours early before my shift and kind of hang around the green room and I'd visit the wardrobe and like the touring team was there. And I'd just be looking at what they're doing and like really wanting to like help or do something and just participate and show like, I have some skills, you can utilize me, like give me something. And I think they didn't trust me because I was a student and they're thinking, oh, these costumes are like 25 years old from the original production of Phantom. You can't have a student like touching them. So it took some time probably of me harassing them. And then finally they're like, okay, you can repair the kabuki curtains that are on the proscenium at the beginning of the show, because every show they get holes torn in them from the statues and all the angels and things. And these are like silk curtains that are like probably 20 years old, so they get holes. So my first job was just stitching all the holes before the night shows. But I did it, and I did it with vigor and enthusiasm. And then slowly they were offering me more. And then one day they said, oh, we could really use someone like you on tour. So then I was offered a touring job. I think I followed them to 2 other cities because I was thinking, oh, well, if you have work and you need me, I don't mind to like start to relocate and maybe move to another city. And then at least then I have a job. And then I think I followed them to 2 cities. And then they were like, okay, now we have extra budget because we're taking the tour here. and so we can give you like the proper contract. And then I just started from there, and I had a job on Wicked in Sydney, and my partner was working in Universal Studios in Singapore, and the head of costuming department heard about me and heard I was working on Wicked, which he was a huge fan of. So immediately he wanted to like just talk to me and hear about it and know about the show. And so when I went to Singapore, I organized to meet him, and he said to me, "Oh, we have some costumes we need redesigned for a show. Like maybe you want to try to propose something." And so I just did some sketches and I sent them to him, and then they ended up using them, like maybe 2 or 3 of my designs, to do the new monster show at Universal Studios Singapore. And then when I finished at Wicked, I ended up moving to Singapore and just deciding to go somewhere different and live with my partner. And I took a full-time job there. And when I started, they didn't really know what I could do for them, but he knew that he just wanted me to be there and then I would be an asset in some way. And I noticed that in Singapore, there's just a lot of opening for people like me who have like skills and maybe like a natural leadership quality. And I was seeing a lot happening and feeling like more could be done. Like, my department was costume tech. So basically we were in charge of maintaining all the costumes in the park, any mascots. We had to run up for emergency painting for penguin beaks, matching the colors on the mascots before they went out for their next dance and this kind of thing. But I just felt like all we were doing was this kind of work, and they were having a lot of events. And I said, well, why can't we just make the stuff in-house instead of like going to a vendor? Because I can do it. And so like, you need 6 headpieces, I can build them here. So then slowly I started working in this way. And then over my years there, I created like a full team of an in-house crew where we would produce a lot of headpieces for the parades, for the shows, special events, a lot of special effects, makeup, prosthetics for Halloween, because we had big Halloween events of like more than 400 people per night. So we'd have to do makeup for 400 people in like 3 hours. So I had a lot of opportunity available to me there. And I just said, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. I can do that. And, I just tried, and I had faith in like my abilities. So I thought, I don't really know how to do that, but I know that I can problem solve and I can figure out how to do it. And I know that I'll do it well. So then I would just try. And then I realized that, oh, I can do that. So my path went from like really like fashion and clothing production into more costumes. And then I started getting into like 3D kind of stuff, like headpieces and all different kinds of things, like weird costumes for the parade, like a girl that has this huge film reel as a skirt, something like this. So naturally I progressed into accessories making. And then I think the next progression from there was puppetry, because it's really like something you can wear it on your body, it can be outside of your body, and it's still using soft materials. It's using some hard materials. You need some skills in 3D fabrication and understanding like how things work in 3D and mechanics and mechanisms, which I was really interested in. So I think just slowly over time, I was just taking any kind of opportunity I could, and especially design work. It's kind of an interesting story how I started my work with Franco and where I am now. Is I had designed some costumes for a grand opening of the resort in Singapore. And they were sent to a vendor of ours in Hong Kong called Limelight Costume Services. And they came to Universal to do some fittings with the performers for the show. And I was downstairs, and the manager of the costuming department introduced me to this lady. And she's like, oh, this is Virginia from Limelight. I'm really busy. I have to run to a meeting, but she has to get to the airport. Do you mind showing her how to get to the taxi rank? And I said, sure. So I just took her to the taxi rank, and we had a nice chat on the way. And then she was gone. And maybe a year later, I got an email from her out of the blue, and she had seen a costume design come through into her company and was like, oh, wow, they've got a really nice designer working there. And she just Googled my name from my signature at the bottom of the design. And she realized that it was me. And she was like, oh, I met him. He was really nice to me. And I'm going to offer him a job on Franco Dragone's show in Wuhan. So she wrote to me, and I was offered a job to work with Yunit, who was an Academy Award winner for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So I was kind of an assistant to the assistant designer, which she was at the time. So yeah, I went from Beijing and then from Singapore, and moved to Beijing. And that's where I started my kind of journey with Franco, which was another crazy experience. And there was also another opportunity I found similar to Universal where there was a lot of opening for me.
Forge your path.
Yeah. So I just kind of did it, then continued. And then again, a few years later, Virginia contacted me and she said, "Oh, can you come to Hong Kong and train my team to do silicone application on costumes?" Because she said, "I've seen your work in that and it's really interesting and we have a project where we need this." So she paid me to fly over for a week and I did some special costumes for them for Norwegian Cruise Line. And then she was chatting with me and she said, "Oh, how would you feel about coming and working with me in Hong Kong?" And so, yeah, we started talking and that's kind of how I got here now. I decided to break away from Franco after many years working with him and start my own little team. And I started my own company and registered it in Dubai. And two of the employees and my colleagues from Dubai that I worked with on a show called La Pearl, I brought them over with me because they were these amazing Ukrainians that I'd been working with for a few years. And so we started like my own little team here. So I partnered with Virginia at Limelight. And so we kind of forged this new kind of innovation department. So now we offer very special kinds of costumes. So we can, we work on circus, theme park. We can do avant-garde kinds of things. We can do exhibition quality. I can do headpieces. We do puppets. So we've kind of combined forces. So it's really like a circle because I met her in Singapore. That took me to Franco, and then she brought me back here. So we kept meeting, and everything's kind of connected.
It's always funny how you never know how you're going to get that next job, but it can be like one of those chance encounters, right? And then suddenly it leads on to a big chapter of your life that
yes.
that you didn't know that was coming around the corner. Do you find that now, obviously you work with a lot of different clients right now, and then the design process, does it vary differently from whether you're working with a theme park to a show to, maybe you still do some theatrical stuff, but and also the sort of navigation of China and Asia in general, it's not necessarily a linear process like it would be in other countries. And so how do you apply a methodology of a design process in the environments that you work?
Well, I think you need to consider what you're designing for. Like you said, there's like circus, there's theatre, there's theme park, and then Franco Dragone shows are all very different, like water shows, that's a whole other element. So you really need to know first what you're designing for. Are you designing for a show where it's going to be worn 10 times a day? What kind of climate are the costumes being worn in? What kind of performance will it be? And then, of course, there's cultural aspects. So, I've worked in Asia, in Europe, in Dubai, Middle East. So each place you work really have different kinds of restrictions and challenges. So whether it's a religious thing, whether it's more about the culture and modesty. So it depends. And each kind of area that you're designing for sometimes has its pros and cons. Like I feel like, I love doing theme park costumes because they're very bright and colorful and exaggerated. But, it's frustrating maybe to design a costume where they say, you can't show skin. So you have to develop a full body lycra suit, and it just kind of, spoils the effect that you're trying to create on the body. But then sometimes these challenges create, it kind of gets your imagination going. So you're trying to work with the challenges or with the restrictions, and you kind of develop and discover something to work around it, and no one would know that was something that you had to consider when they see the costume. And of course, working somewhere like Paris is different because they almost wore nothing in the Lido. So
that was a very short production time on that one, huh?
Yeah, it's like put some beads on a string, done, but they have like the elements of it, like major amounts of accessories. So they have headpieces, things adorning their body, maybe like a wasted corset. So it's just something accentuating the waist, but leaving all the other parts revealed. So obviously much smaller, but then really high amounts of detail and time. And especially working somewhere like Paris, you know, you have amazing artists and people who do one thing in their life and do it amazingly. So I got to work with some really amazing people, you know, who one man, his job was just, he would make wire structures to attach all the feather, like backpacks and headpieces to. And he'd been doing it his whole life and worked with all different kinds of designers. And I'm at his house and he just has this like amazing workshop full of all the old experiments and prototypes he'd done in his life. And he just did this one thing, but amazingly, and like made his whole life about it. And yeah, so interesting, you know.
It's so fascinating to meet somebody that masters their craft to such an extent, right? And especially in a single focus, you know, it's you know, they always say it's like the 10,000 hours rule. Like you become a master of something after you've done 10,000 hours of it. And he would, if he's done it his whole life, I mean, it's like the sensei of of wire work, right?
Definitely, yeah. And his wife was telling me that, you know, he'd been looking for an apprentice for a long time to kind of download his knowledge to, because he was getting old and close to retirement age. But he's very like a stubborn man, you know, a bit difficult, and he finds it hard to find people that have patience for him. I was like throwing up my hand and saying, I'll live here and I'll learn from him, and like I don't even understand what he's saying, so he can't really bother me. Yeah, it was just an amazing process because, you know, we're making a headpiece, so maybe I would input something like I would make the base that is actually worn on the head, and then he would make a wire structure which attached to the base to then support the feathers, and then that would go off to the special person that did all the feather work to do the feathers, and then it would come back to the guy that does all the crystal installation. So they really like separate it like this, you know, whereas usually in my work with Franco Dragone, it's like I do everything. You know, if something needs to be done, I do get everything from start to finish, which is my favorite kind of process. You know, that's why I love working on theatre, like to do show creations. I love working from the very beginning and then seeing it at the end. And the feeling of fulfillment it gives you is like so great. So it's the same as doing any small job every day. Obviously, working with designers are amazing, and I love that, but it's also nice to sometimes design something yourself. And then you really have thought about it when you put pen to paper and you know as you're going exactly how you're going to build it. So it's really clear in your mind and you can then bring it to life and then see it on stage, and that feeling is amazing. But it's also nice just to work with a designer and ask them what they want and then give them ideas how to achieve it, and then they really put their trust in you, and then you experiment, you know, you do some back and forth, and then you create something that you love and then that they love, and that makes, you know, gives you a lot of fulfillment.
I think that makes you quite employable then, right? Because you're happy to take the lead role, but you're also happy to take a supporting role in the process or anything in between. And that I mean, that's such a wanted kind of, and I think that's a very an Australian approach. You know, it's what does it take to get the job done? And I'll fill that. I'll fill that role if that's what you need me to do. You know, you agree with me?
Yeah, I think being versatile is important. Like definitely, I have respect and I see value in people that do one thing, you know, and do it amazingly, you know, and that's really their art form. But I think for me personally, I do one thing and then I see something else and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. I want to do that now. So I find it hard to do just one thing because it's not enough. And then, so I think over time it makes you versatile, and definitely it makes you very employable because, you know, 1 minute I'm sewing a piece of clothing, and then the next minute, you know, I'm making a shoe cover, and then, you know, I'm being asked to mold and sculpt some special effects makeup for a video shoot, and then I'm applying makeup, you know, and so you're able to fulfill all these roles. And of course, that's a desirable trait with employers, I think, if they have somebody that can do multiple roles, or even just the fact that you have an understanding of other parts of the process. So it makes your job in that one part of the process easier for them because you're thinking ahead of what has to happen next. So you're able to really offer something that's had some forethought and you have a really clear understanding. Whereas some people, they are maybe handed something and they just do what they're told. And then later on, it goes to the next step in the process, like rehearsal. And then people find out they didn't think about whether the shoes slip on that floor or not, or whether that material is resistant to chlorine, and then there's a problem that then has to come back to you. So sometimes if you've worked in different kind of areas, you kind of have an idea what the next step's going to be. So when you're working on one of the steps beforehand, you're kind of already thinking, oh, well, I need to ask what floor is the stage? Like what colors are in the theatre, that it should match with? Or you can ask all these kind of questions, and it really, I think, it helps the designer, because otherwise they have to think of everything themselves to tell you. But if you can kind of think for them and with them, it's very beneficial.
Very curious about, you've mentioned a lot of things that we not always think on costumes. Props is like everything goes, but maybe not so much costumes. So what's the role of technology and new materials? What do you see in the industry? How do they shape fabrication? I don't know. What do you like about them? But do you see, like, I'm sure you've seen the trend on new materials, both in fabrics and then in maybe some resins and, I don't know, endless paint, and everything's changing.
I mean, new materials are being developed all the time because they're better than the previous ones. So I think I always love to explore what new materials are out there, because you find that it fulfills like requirements of 10 other materials, or a specific, like, say, for instance, one thing that I'm always really relying on is a really good, strong glue for anything that I'm building. So sometimes I'll have a favorite glue, and then I'll one day do some more research and I'll discover a different kind of glue, and then I test it and I realize, oh my God, it glues this and it glues that. Now I can just use that. And then I find another one.
This is my new favorite glue.
Yeah. And then sometimes you research companies and it's like they have the most amazing products and adhesives that do things you've never thought of. And then it like sparks your ideas and you're like, oh my God, so I can do this and I can do that. And same thing with materials, like for costumes. For example, one of my favorite materials to use is neoprene, which kind of was introduced to me when I was in Singapore, but more so working with Franco Dragone because of the water element to the shows. And it's an amazing fabric because it's soft and it's stretchy, but it's also structural. Like it holds shape.
It holds form very well, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you can do some interesting things. And I've actually built headpieces out of neoprene using it like foam sheets, because it could go in water. It was flexible. They could fall on their head on top of it and it would just pop back into shape. But a problem I found with it is that it's very hot. It holds heat, because it's a layer of rubber in between two layers of like a stretch fabric. But now I've discovered a company in Japan that makes the neoprene full of perforations, but the fabric bonded on either side doesn't have holes. So it doesn't look like it has any holes. So now it's fulfilled this role of being the material that I love to use, but I can also use it in costumes where before I couldn't because it got too hot for the artist. And there's more breathability and there's more ability for the costume to dry faster in between shows and this kind of thing. So I think that's why I always love exploring and seeing what people are developing. And I think technology plays an important role in costuming anyway, because as technology develops, there's more that you can do with it. So, I mean, you see the craze of electrical parades for Disney and this kind of thing now. Everything has LEDs and EL wire and all of this kind of stuff attached. And then a problem for them probably was like power, getting power to everybody. And in the beginning, they probably were wearing huge battery packs that were like maybe dangerous, got hot, had acid or something, very heavy, hard to disguise in the costume. So then, of course, as technology is developing, batteries are getting smaller and smaller and, longer lasting, higher power, this kind of stuff. So now you can fit tiny batteries very flat in a costume that power something that maybe a car battery was being used, years ago. So I think in that way, it plays a really important role in costuming, as well as, obviously things like 3D printing has become a big craze and technology is developing there where you're able to start printing in flexible materials that can be worn on the body without fear of smashing it. you can use it to quickly develop a prototype of something. So you'll know in a few hours whether it's going to work or it's the right size. People 3D print objects to make a mold, where in the past maybe you had to sculpt something out of clay. And obviously it's going to be much more precise and perfect and symmetrical and accurate. So yeah, I think technology and in costuming is really exciting. And I mean, I could go on about it like even more, like every aspect that it affects and why I like it.
What's your research methods in that? Like, how do you go and find those new technologies? How do you come across those things to start? I mean, because obviously you're very busy making stuff and producing stuff as well. So what's your process for that?
Well, there's a few ways. I think one way is when you're looking for vendors. Obviously, I'm always working in many different countries, and every time I relocate, I have to find a new supplier for specialty materials, because I don't use just like some lycra from a fabric shop or some cotton. It's like I'm using specialty material. And then adhesives and things like that are all specialty. So then you move to a new country and it's like you have to start from scratch, like your sourcing list, like your suppliers that can get things to you that you need. There's always a time where I'm just online searching for adhesive companies, special effects suppliers, cosplay suppliers, like anything around that can offer me something. So sometimes when you're exploring those kind of people, different countries offer different things and have something you've never used before. And not often you're wanting to buy it, not knowing what it is, just to try it. But sometimes you get a free sample of something, or sometimes you'll be introduced to a new material just from being in a different workplace in a different country. Sometimes I love watching YouTube videos of like my favorite designers or different people that I'm interested in. And then I'll see in their workshop and I'll see like a specific brand of something that they're using that I have been wanting to know for years. And then I screenshot and I zoom in and I'm like, what does that say? And I try to find what I think it says. And then I'll like find it. And I'm like, I know what that is now. I can try it for myself. Because of course, like you can imagine, some people in this field and in this industry are very protective of their secrets, and companies as well, specifically. So when they've developed something or they have a material or something that's working well for them and it gives them the upper hand over other businesses, they don't want that information to get out. So often you're seeing it all around you and then you're like, but where do I get that? And you don't know even how to start searching for it. So sometimes I'm lucky and I can find it quite quickly just from being like, oh, what's some keywords, something that, reminds me of this thing. I can search for it. Maybe I'll find a picture of something similar and then I can jump into that rabbit hole and then maybe it'll take me somewhere else and I'll find it. And then sometimes you can't find it at all. And then one day, just by chance, it'll come to you or you'll meet somebody that tells you about it. But me as an individual, I love to share all my information. So whenever I work with people and if they show an interest in what I'm doing, I probably don't shut up, because I start showing them everything that I have in my workshop. Oh, look at this, you can use this for that. And you just like use the heat gun and then you form it and it becomes this thing. And then I'm like, yeah, come and, ask questions. You can hang out in my workshop if you want.
I can totally vouch for that.
spend
so much time asking questions and getting answers. So it's good. Yeah. But so this leads me to something that I've thought will branch out a little bit about the technology, and we might be coming back in a future episode. Who knows? But tell us about your relationship with people. People love working with you. People love working for you. And I think there's two different things. And you usually get along with people really well. Why do people love you that much?
Well, that's very nice of you to say, firstly. I think my kind of motto in life, or my attitude, is that I just really like to treat people the way that I want to be treated. As Anna said before, like you never know what opportunities are coming up next. But I'm not behaving with that in the forefront of my mind. But it's like a symptom of my behavior, I think. So first and foremost, I just want to treat people with respect and how I would want to be treated as a human being. And then a symptom of that is, I think people are drawn to that. And if you give them that kind of respect and time of day and attention, then they are drawn to you. something. Working in different countries and different cultures, you often see that, I thought that quality was quite common in people, but I find that the more places I work, it's not that common actually. In my younger years, I was very introverted, and I saw the value in when people would give me attention because it was hard for me to talk to people. So when I had people coming up to talk to me, obviously that was something that immediately I could react to because I didn't have to go through that fear of creating a conversation or an interaction with them. They came to me and it was like, now I can have this talk, but I didn't have to be the one to start it. So now when I see people kind of in the same way, I think that I want to try to show them that you don't have to be like worried to talk to me or open up. One example of that I really felt rewarded by was when I was working in Dubai. There's so many different people working in the theatre with us. You have performers, you've got crew, you've got the wardrobe team, technical team, backstage crew, artistic directors, all the people in the offices, company managers, this kind of thing. And then there's also the people in the building who are the security guards, and I found that the security guards were often overlooked and not really treated like people. You just walk in and ignore them and then keep going. But I felt like they were working really hard. They were always there 24 hours a day. They were often there when you left at night and still there in the morning. And I just felt like, wow, I really respect them. And I don't know why nobody is like saying hi and giving them a smile or something like that. So I'd make sure when I would see them, I'd like learn their name. And I think if you learn somebody's name and you use it, it's like the most important word to a person when you hear your name being said. And then immediately you can create a connection with somebody. So I tried to learn as many people's names as I could, and I would greet them with their name so that they felt like they had some importance, to the people there. It really helps you spark some really rewarding relationships and getting to know some people that are very, like, from a completely different background than you, not creative at all, maybe something totally different and not creative and interesting, like as an occupation for me. But, they can share their life story. And yeah, like you just never know what can come out of that. So my example earlier where I met this lady from a costume shop in Hong Kong, and I was just friendly to her and helped her to the taxi rank. And then she remembered that here we are years later working together for the second time. And it was all really just from that one interaction. That's probably why I think it's just treating people the way that you want to be treated. That's the secret, my secret.
So a little bit wrapping up kind of. So what would you say is the thing that you like the most about your job?
There's a lot of things, different things I love about my job. But I think what I appreciate the most is that I can be creative. There's not many people who can make a career out of being creative. And just the fact that I'm doing something that I love and being paid to do that. So many people think that a career is something that you do for money, but you shouldn't necessarily like it. Whereas I get to do something I love and I get paid for it. And I think when you do something you love, you're going to have passion and you're going to have a good work ethic and you're going to work hard at it. So you're going to be, you would assume, naturally good at it, So I think I've been lucky enough to have support from family and friends and my partner, and to follow my, the things that I love and my passion, which has kind of led me to doing something that I'm really good at. And I'm willing to put in time and energy into it because I enjoy it.
So on the flip side, if you could change something about your job or the industry, what would it be?
I think it depends what way you look at it. If you're looking at it from like how it impacts the globe, I think it would be about a more sustainable approach to production, because I think I've experienced a lot of waste, whether it's money going into things that weren't used. It's a lot of materials and offcuts and things being used, especially when you're in a production industry. And I'm quite, I care a lot about the planet and the environment, so it's definitely something I think of. But if it's more about industry related, it's a difficult question.
It's good. It's good if you don't have anything that you want to change. And I don't think that the planet is not necessarily, and nothing is unrelated to that, even our industry. And even though a lot of the driving forces behind making shows and making things in theme parks are not from that premise, I think at some point it will need to be, or will become a greater focus in terms of sustainability, or at least I hope so. And the fact that it's already on people's minds now is and that we're conscious of it and maybe even a little bit guilty of it, then it's starting to change that psychology and the approach over time,
Yeah, that's true. Well, now that we're talking a little bit, I think one thing that I could comment on that question is that I would probably change, the importance that it has in different cultures around the world. Coming from Australia, I feel like our industry doesn't really have the respect of others. It's in other countries too. Like, you tell them, "Oh, I do costumes," and they're like, "Oh, but that's a hobby. What's your job?" And I'm like, "No, that's my job." So it can be difficult in different areas in life, like trying to explain things to people, like anything, like with the government, applications for something, bureaucracy. It's like there's never that box that you can tick where it's like, what's your industry, or like what's your occupation? Or when you're going across the border and it's like, what do you do? And you put costumer, and people have no idea what that is. So I think now in like this crisis with COVID, it's very clear that our industry doesn't have a lot of respect of many governments, and isn't seen as important because we're often the industry that budgets are cut from. They're just not appreciating it for what it is. And like, if you think of a country like Paris, Paris is what it is because of all the artists and like thinkers and great minds that came from there. So if you didn't have a creative industry, none of that would exist, and we would just have, government offices and buildings and, the daily grind. You don't have all that beautiful added stuff of life,
It's everything that creates a culture, and
exactly.
and a space around the world. And if it's not there, then what is there left, right? And that's hopefully in my dream there's a future where we're not valuing a country on their economy, but more on their happiness in terms of communities. But that's a very utopian ideal, really. but in that is arts, and that in that kind of model of a country that values people's happiness and well-being and everything. Arts is, of course, a large part of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Jozef, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been really good to hear your experiences, and thank you for sharing with us all your knowledge and time.
You're welcome.
I really like for people to go and visit your website, see what you do, Google you up, because you do some pretty cool stuff. So do you want to share your website with our listeners?
Sure. So my personal website is just www.jozefkoda.com. So JOZEFKODA. And you can see examples of my work from my very young years to almost today. But currently I'm working on some things that I can't share with the world yet. So maybe, you can keep an eye out in the next year or so and you'll see them. And you can just check out what I'm doing. Anyone can email me if they have questions or want to know more or have any interest, or you're in Hong Kong and you want to come and see my workshop because it's very interesting and inspiring.
I'm going to totally take you up on that offer.
Yeah, do it. Please. I haven't seen like people outside my workshop for a long time. So it'd be good.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Jozef, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Please write a review on our podcast, whatever you listen to your podcast, and let your friends know about us. You can learn more about TheatreArtLife by visiting our website at www.theatreartlife.com. And you can also follow us on social media and leave your questions and comments on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Twitter, or YouTube. We want to thank David Sire for composing the music for our podcast and Michelle Girata, who is our sound engineer. We are your hosts, Anna and Anna, and this is the Theatre Art Life podcast, where we put the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the world.